Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. We've got big news in the world of Ruby on Rails today. This morning, DHH announced on his personal blog that the next version of Turbo is going to be dropping the use of TypeScript. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with what Turbo is, it's a component of the hotwired framework. And Turbo, along with Stimulus.js, form the basis of this new front-end framework, which is the default front-end designed to work with Ruby on Rails. Turbo and Stimulus take a different approach to handling JavaScript from the popular front-end systems that are common today, like React or Angular. Unlike React, which turns the client side of your website into a JavaScript application with some rendered HTML, Hotwired is more of a complement to the traditional HTML template renderings of Ruby on Rails, and it gives you a structure so that you can make your web page more dynamic by adding sprinklings of JavaScript. I've been using both Turbo and Stimulus in my projects extensively, and I like them. You can see them in action in my project, USTreasuryYieldCurve.com. Turbo has a long history with Rails. It has its roots in a project called Turbo Links, which came packaged in earlier versions of Rails. Turbo Links was a tool designed to help web pages load faster. It worked kind of like a browser cache, where whenever you would make a web request, rather than re-render the entire page, it would use JavaScript to selectively load and refresh parts of the page. It did its job in improving performance, but in practice, this led to many headaches for developers. Sometimes, it would cause your application's JavaScript to not work as expected, and many times the solution has been just to disable Turbo Links. Turbo Links is now replaced by Turbo in Rails 7 and introduces new features such as Turbo Frames. Turbo is designed to work with the Stimulus framework. If you're using alongside Stimulus to encapsulate your own application code, it works pretty well from what I've experienced. Now, TypeScript is an addition to the JavaScript ecosystem that introduces strong types. So, for example, if you have a variable that's a string, you need to declare it as a string in your TypeScript, and then you have to run it through a compiler. If you try to assign a number to a string variable, then TypeScript is going to throw an error and it won't compile. This is nice for complex business logic and when you're dealing with really complicated data like you would with JSON. So here I want to show you a little bit about how TypeScript is currently used inside of the Turbo application. So this is an earlier commit, not the one that has TypeScript removed, but this is kind of giving you a sense of what it looked like before. So here's the entry file. We go to Turbo start. And then here you could see, like within the function start, there's like a session start. So we'll go over to session, see what's in there. But here attached to the session is where we get some of the methods that allow us to do things in Turbo. So for example, here we have the Turbo documentation, and there's a turbo.visit method, and that allows you to go places using Turbo. You can navigate with that. And here's where that function is declared, and this is where the value of TypeScript comes in, is that you've got these arguments that you could pass to it, but what exactly is in these arguments? What would be an acceptable thing that you could pass to visit? Well, you could figure that out by looking at the types here. For example, with the visit options, we could go there, see where it's declared. So in visit options, it's an object. You could give it information such as an action, or history changed, which is a Boolean type. These are different things that you could pass into where visit options is. And anyway, this is why some developers really like TypeScript, is because it adds this additional documentation into the code. And if you're new to a program, it kind of helps you find your way a little bit better versus like with the Rails source code, where there's a lot of cases where you could pass options into something, but it's not really clear exactly what the selection of options could be. So that's the argument in favor of TypeScript. TypeScript makes code easier to understand, especially if you're new to the code base, and ultimately it leads to code with fewer bugs because the TypeScript compiler can identify syntax-related issues early on. But those advantages come at quite a cost. TypeScript has quite a steep learning curve. For example, some of the types could get really complex, especially when you're making custom types like key value stores or enumerables. I tried going through some code here trying to dig a complex example of what difficult TypeScript looks like, and this is kind of one of the examples I found. Is if you look here at this add event listener function, so you have a custom key type here. This type of key is reused several times here in the declaration, and this function declaration here has options, Boolean, multiple things that you could pass into it. And the problem is, like, if you're new to TypeScript and you're not used to it, a line like this is somewhat intimidating to read, even more so to write from scratch. I mean, typing this stuff out could certainly slow you down by quite a bit. In the end, you get this really long line of angled brackets and parentheses, and this is just a very simple example, actually, compared to how difficult TypeScript can get, especially if you're using a library like Apollo or something like that. Here, I kind of want to show you a taste of what error messages look like. They're not any better. So here we have an argument type that doesn't match. Some of these error messages could get very long where they scroll off for page after page because they're describing like a very long complex type. And that could be very difficult to read and figure out. While you can get used to it, even for an experienced programmer in TypeScript, it could get kind of cumbersome and tedious to deal with. And in this example right here, I don't even know why I'm getting an error here. I think something might be incorrect with my IntelliJ setup where it's not running this code through the right version of TypeScript or something, but I get this type of problem a lot where in my editor, the TypeScript doesn't really compile properly like it should. The disadvantage of TypeScript overall is that doing all of this typing, no pun intended, could lead to some lost productivity. So I can understand DHH's point of view. DHH is the kind of person who likes to prototype ideas and move quickly. Prototype code doesn't really have to be perfect, but it has to do things. And like he says, TypeScript gets in the way of that. The idea behind Hotwired is to provide a lightweight structure for JavaScript that's complementary to your Rails app. And TypeScript adds a lot of tedious work, which isn't fun. As you could probably imagine, this was a very controversial decision. They merged this today. They removed TypeScript from the project. And a lot of people protested this. They're not really happy with that decision. There's another pull request that somebody opened. I think this is a joke here that says add TypeScript. And somebody makes an argument for bringing it back. And it looks like it just reverts the TypeScript that DHH removed. A lot of people are in support of putting it back. I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see if this goes anywhere, but I have the feeling that DHH is going to win. But anyway, what do you think? Tell me in the comments below, and like this video if you found it to be informative and helpful, and subscribe to my channel. I'm Winston, and I'll see you in the next video.